first bit.
Alright, hello everyone, I'm Tyler. I think we're going to get started today. Thanks for coming to the archives. If you haven't been here before, I recognize most of you, so thanks for coming back. There's some literature up here about open air, if anyone is interested after the talk to pick up some of that. And we have some schedules up here. And just let you know, the brown bag for November 26th, the day before Thanksgiving, is canceled. Was the easiest that way. I couldn't really find anyone that wasn't in town. But anyway, today we have artists from Open Air, and they did all of this artwork out in the hallway and down in the basement. And this exhibit is called Mine, Excavating Technologies. Mine is a powerful exhibition inspired by the rich ecological and cultural landscapes of the upper Clark Fork River, featuring works by Eric Jensen, Lane Chapman, and Manette Bradford. The show explores place, identity, and the lingering impact of mining in Montana. 2024 artists and residents Jensen and Chapman developed their projects during open-air residencies in partnership with the Clark Fork Coalition, working from shared studios at the Cottonwood Field Station. And Bradford completed her residency here at the Hungry Hill Art Center in Butte. Again, thank you three for coming to present, and go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Susie Elliott. I'm the Events and Exhibitions Coordinator with Open Air. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, Open Air is an arts nonprofit based in Missoula. We offer artist and residency programs, partnering with sites across western Montana to provide time and space for place-based art making, while providing workshops, events, and presentations to the community. We're currently wrapping up our fall session with 9 artists and residents at the Flathead Lake Biological Station, Hamilton, and here in Butte. And for those of you who are hungry for more, you can join us on Saturday. We have a Butte's Art Conference at the Clark Chateau from 10 to 3, featuring the artists who are currently residing here in town. And also, if you're interested, our call for artists is live, and if you know someone who might be interested, or you're interested in yourself in applying, you can find out more at our website, openairmt.org. Presenting first today is going to be Lane Chapman, followed by Eric Jensen, and then Manette Bradford. After the presentation, I encourage you all to take a look around at their art and spend some time reading their statements. Lane, I'll let you take it away.
Oh no, okay. I'm gonna move this a little bit because it's like in my face. Was that a short joke?
Not a very good one.
So I'm going to put a timer on just so I kind of keep track of where I'm at. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today, and thanks to the Archives and Open Air for putting this together. I'm really excited to talk about my work. Again, my name is Lane Chapman. I work mostly in ceramics and printmaking. And I'm really good at losing track of my thoughts and not great at public speaking, so I have paper that I'll probably read a lot from, just to make sure I get everything in I want to say. And just a note, this is just because I'm weird, a lot of my photos are in progress, so I don't have like professional images of them yet. So I want to start with an introduction about myself and how I arrived where I am today. I was born in Central Arkansas, and I received my BFA from the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And in 2017, then I moved to Rochester, New York for a 2-year ceramic art residency. And then I moved to Missoula for a 2-year residency at the Clay Studio, and then did a couple other random residencies, and then Open Air was the last one I did. But I fell in love with Missoula and I wanted to stay, like most do. So I applied for grad school and I got in. and I'm in my third year, my thesis year, for my MFA at UM. Okay, so let's go way back for a sec. As a child, I remember turning over old tires to search for insects, forcing my mom to stop the car to hurry a turtle across the road, and building critter homes out of mud in my grandparents' garden. I was always barefoot, planting myself into the soil. For as long as I can remember, I've had a deep connection with the earth and its natural inhabitants. It has only grown stronger as I've grown older. And you'll see this, and it's very clear in my work. And looking back over my work over the years, other than being horrified at my old work, I've never not included the natural world in some degree. So prior to grad school and my open-air residency, I was working as a full-time functional potter, making pots for daily use. I was also making large decorative vessels during this time that I saw as urns, vessels to hold memories and my own grief for the little critters that I revere. And now let's come back to the present. I'm going to read a really depressing thing that I wrote, and then we'll continue. Human activities have profoundly altered natural habitats across the globe, often to the detriment of biodiversity and ecosystem stability. Deforestation, urbanization, and industrial development fragment landscapes, reducing the available space for wildlife and disrupting critical ecological functions. Pollution from plastic waste to chemical runoff poisons ecosystems and harms species that rely on clean water and air. Additionally, climate change driven by human actions shifts temperature and weather patterns, making once suitable habitats inhospitable to many species. And these changes are compounded by overexploitation of natural resources, such as habitat destruction through mining. Together, these human impacts create a cascade of environmental loss, threatening species and the balance of ecosystems that sustain our life on Earth. And this leads me to the ecological grief that so many of us share. It's an emotional response to the loss of degradation of ecosystems and species driven by human activities like the ones I just mentioned. Eco-grief highlights the intersection between environmental destruction and emotional well-being, underscoring the profound sense of loss that many of us feel as we witness the decline of planet's biodiversity. And for myself personally, it offers a lens through which to process and express these complex emotions. And I'm gonna go back because I made last-minute edits. These complex emotions and events led me to the Clark Fork Coalition and Open Air. I chose to apply for the specific residency site for many reasons. A few of those sorry, I lost my space. For those not familiar, the Clark Fork Coalition is an environmental protection agency that cleans up the river from the mining contamination from Butte down to Missoula. And my decision to apply for this specific residency is rooted in my passion for leveraging art as a powerful medium for raising awareness about environmental issues. The Coalition's mission of river conservation, habitat restoration, and community engagement resonates with my art practice. The opportunity of this residency would give me a chance to immerse myself in this place, the land, and the vital ecosystems that sustain us. So my friend and co-resident, Eric, applied to this residency together. We worked tirelessly on our application because we wanted this opportunity so badly, and we were so excited when we got accepted. So I packed up my car with every art supply I've ever bought that I haven't used in 10 years, but I'd use it there, right? I didn't. And then, so this is the view from the field station studio space that we made and from the river. So I'm gonna go back to this. So the first thing we did was we all came to Butte and took a tour of the working copper mine, the Berkeley Pit, and an underground mine at the Mining Museum. And this is where I really became obsessed with mining history, contamination, human-caused environmental damage, etc. But I didn't know how far this was gonna go at the time. What I love so much about Open Air, other than their incredible people, is that these residencies are heavily focused on research and idea forming. I didn't make that much work during the residency, but I used my experience to create work afterwards. Because I just finished my first year of grad school, it was really freeing to not have the pressures of deadlines, teaching, grading, and defending my every thumbprint in my clay. During my residency, I spent a lot of time wandering, hiking, collecting, drawing, reading scientific reports about the river that were at the field station, taking photos, exploring the river, thinking way too much, and most importantly, birding, which became a very important subject for my current work, and I promise I will get to the art soon. Okay, so the area that we were at was the Deer Lodge Valley between Deer Lodge and Anaconda, and the most contaminated areas are along the riverbanks and the floodplains. And these areas are riparian ecosystems, and a lot of birds depend on them. So birds are seen as indicator species because they are sensitive to environmental change, their presence and health reflect the health of the ecosystem, and they're easy to observe and study. I'm a huge bird nerd, and the birding here was incredible. And I was just telling Eric that I forgot my binoculars, and I was gonna bird on my way home, and I was like, am I even a birder? And there was this family of kestrels in the bottom middle photo that I saw almost every day in that same tree, which was a treat. So naturally, because of the amazing birdings, birds have become my main focus or symbol metaphor in my work. My time in this beautiful landscape affected my work in the following months and still today, and I really realized how important place and land were to me and to all living things. Everything's connected, and there's no part of the land that is safe from human effects, even when it looks idyllic. So during my residency, I primarily worked in printmaking just because clay is kind of hard to move around, and I used the Butte printmaking studio here. And so I transferred what I was seeing and experiencing directly from my studio chair. So the print is basically the view that I was seeing every day, and the ranch that we were staying on, so the field station is in the center of a ranch, and so I saw cows and sheep grazing often. At first, I thought this print was going to be about ranching, and in a sense it is, but I think it goes deeper than that. Because I live in the West, I think a lot about manifest destiny and that American ideal of conquering the land. On top of this fragmented, idyllic pastoral landscape sits a human attempt to sits a human element of progress, a copper mining headframe. This imagery suggests a cultivated environment as an attempt to tame wilderness and to render it productive. I use a thin mulberry paper and embroidery thread as a metaphor for this landscape. It's a material that is resistant and strong, but will eventually rip and tear after repeated punctures, similar to how the land is overgrazed, overworked, and overused until it is exhausted. So, to switch gears just a little bit, and I promise this will relate, I've been interested in the Victorian era and its aesthetic on and off over the years, but I've never really known like the history of that era. And the contamination from mining and the flood from 1908 that brought all that contamination down to Missoula happened during the Victorian era. And these are some images from the river floodplains that are contaminated, and those are copper sulfates coming from the ground. And it turns organic materials like turquoise blue. And so I found that foot, I think it's from a coot, in the soil. And Eric and I kind of explored those areas a little bit just to get some images. So the Copper Kings that ruled Butte lived in Victorian mansions. They would have most likely decorated their homes with fanciful objects, such as the ones shown in this Victorian household goods catalog that I have. And this was a big inspiration for a lot of vessels that I made. This era was the beginning of mass consumerism in a large, well-to-do middle class that had the leisure time to collect objects. Not only was it the height of industrialization in America, i.e. the beginning of mass pollution, it was a time that was obsessed with nature while actively destroying it. Victorian homes would have been decorated with textiles, wallpapers, paintings, sculpture, and pottery depicting the natural world. Victorian society had a unique relationship with nature. It's characterized by both admiration and control. One reason is due to industrialization and smog, and humans moving from rural to urban areas. Victorians sought refuge in their homes and made them their sanctuaries. They brought the outside in because the outside no longer resembled their romanticized nature. So through collecting information on the Victorian era, my experience during my residency and observing the birds in that specific area, and then researching the effect of the contamination on those birds, this piece called Indicators came into fruition, and this is the blue one that's downstairs against the wall. The sculpted birds on this are ones that live in that valley, so I used reference photos from the willow flycatcher, the yellow warbler, and the American redstart. These songbirds are affected by the contamination that still exists, and I see this as a vessel to hold the grief for that and the ones we lost, and the hope that the beauty still exists. And that's just a Wedgwood vessel that inspired that piece. And this piece is outside in the hall over here. And it's also inspired by the copper mining contamination, but using the heron as a focal point and then using actual copper nuggets. This piece brought up a big issue for me. Being in grad school, you have to defend everything, every choice you make. And this was a question that came up. And I asked myself, is my environmental footprint greater than the message of my work? And to be honest, I'm not really sure. I hope so. As I work with clay, a material and process with its own environmental footprint, I face a constant tension between creating and exploiting the earth. When I build my work, I use coil and pinch techniques to build my vessels, and that shows the direct evidence of my hands, speaking to the evidence of human impact and to my own complicity in altering the land. And this is really depressing, and it leads me to my current work. So my current content is rooted in ecological grief that I talked about earlier, and the tangled history of humans' attempts to control nature. With vessels, sculptures, and prints, I create objects and imagery that I believe speak for the birds, rivers, and the landscapes harmed by industrial ambition. I want to show the effects of humans, but I also want to celebrate nature's beauty and resilience. In other words, I want to make things that are beautiful, but make you a little uncomfortable. One way I've been doing this is recreating these vintage porcelain bird figurines. And it's funny, I've been obsessed with these since I was a kid. My mom used to have a bunch of them, and it's funny how it comes back full circle. But I've been flipping their message. I see these figurines as a version of nature that is safe, pristine, and traditionally beautiful. And I made a couple of these, but instead of being beautiful, I made dead birds, smoke plumes. I have some that have oil barrels and other such things. But I didn't find them successful. I thought they were a little too direct. I then obsessively searched for these figurines. My mom, they're everywhere in Arkansas, and my mom sent me a box full of them. And it's funny because my mom now is very supportive of me, but she knows I make work about dead things, and she was like, what are you going to do with these, Lane? And I said, I don't know yet. She's like, you're not going to make them skeletons or something, are you? And I was like, no. But in a sense, I kind of did. Maybe she gave me the idea. That said, I decided to alter the actual figurines instead of recreating them. Why make more permanent trash when I can reuse these? In these versions, I covered them in goopy, foamy, gross glazes, and I want to portray an intrusion of the ecological reality that we live in into a curated, controlled environment, which goes back to Victorians' obsession with nature in their homes. With these figurines, I am asking, what is the true state of nature today? What lies beneath our carefully curated representations of nature? I've been enjoying embroidering my prints, and this print is very similar to the prior one with the head frame. It is the same print, but different embroidery. And I want to physically impose these man-made objects onto the landscape and to show the human component with the issues we are facing. For some reason, I'm obsessed with really old wooden billboards that you see on the highways here. So I was just thinking about consumerism, capitalism, advertising. This is a print I'm working on right now. I'm in the final layer, and I'll do the same to these prints when they're finished. And this print was drawn from a photo that I took at Warm Springs while I was birding of a section of the water that had a lot of green algae growing. And yeah, so all of this has been pretty depressing, right? I know. But there's still hope, and we can't lose it. As Robin Wall Kimmerer says in Braiding Sweetgrass, when we look at the land, we see what has been destroyed. Wetlands drained, forests cleared, rivers dammed, and the air thick with smoke. But if we look with the eyes of our hearts, we also see the resilience, the regeneration, and the healing. And that leads me to some more current work. I believe for myself that making art about these critters and this land is a reverent act. Reverence is a feeling of or attitude of deep respect tinged with awe or veneration, or it is also the outward manifestation of this feeling. And I define this because it directly relates to what I'm thinking about when I'm making the following work. I've been thinking a lot about Catholic saints and their relics. Relics are revered to inspire drawing closer to God, to remind of the saint's holiness, not to worship the relics themselves. And so I'm interested in making these relics or reliquaries for pieces of these animals that we've lost, or that, you know, like how you leave little sacrifices or objects at an altar. And these are outside, and so because that soil turns those bones blue, I collected some of it, and then I just have random bones that I found and put them in the water, and they turned blue in like 30 minutes. Some of them didn't. Some out there's one that's growing like really gross algae that didn't turn. I put clay in it to see if the clay would turn, and it wouldn't. And so it grew this like gross algae on it. And then I think because of like where I get the soil from and how contaminated it is, depends on if it turns blue or not. I've had some turn like a black color. So I'm still doing experiments, safely, of course. So recently, I've been making a lot of urns. And I was wondering to myself, instead of praying to human saints, what if we prayed to animal saints, like Saint Heron or Saint Vulture or Saint Kestrel? And it's hard to see the imagery on these, but there are birds for each one. So these urns are made for specific birds. They're empty, of course. But I want to pay homage to these amazing critters that give us life physically and mentally. So each one of these will be different birds. The one on the far left will be tree swallow, nighthawk, and then kestrel, I believe. And I have one other one that's a northern harrier. So in August, I was able to stay at the field station again for a few days. It was really special to be back in that place with those critters. I went birding a lot at the Warm Springs. I gathered a slew of photos, experiences, and thoughts for near future projects. And while I was there, I smiled knowing that the birds are still there, the place is still alive, and beauty and devastation often coexist. Thank you so much. Are we doing questions later?
Yeah, if people have questions.
I don't.
Are we doing Q&A first and then switch it?
If anyone has any, yeah, feel free.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Lane, feel free. We can also have a Q&A at the end.
Let's do Q&A.
I don't know how to switch.
It's okay. Sorry, Eric.
Thank you. Oh, we'll spend it for a minute.
Good job.
Question.
Yeah.
How did you think of did you say the bone relics or?
The bone? Like
Yeah, I guess how
relics?
did you think of that comparison or to use it that way?
I think that I grew up very religious, not Catholic or Church of Christ, but I just love how, like the Victorian era, the Catholic relics are so opulent and like put on this pedestal to like worship these beings that did something good in their lives. And I worship nature like that, and so I just thought it was a good correlation for that. Yeah.
Let's see the present button.
It's hard to see.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Okay. All right. What?
My water, I think you just.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Let's put that there. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for being here. I'll also be reading my talk to you, so bear with me. So I was at the same residency as Lane last year, and it was really a varied and multifaceted experience for me. A large part of being an artist for me is knowing when to work and when not to work. My life can largely be defined by the importance or priority placed on making artwork and the larger effects of that priority. It's a balancing act that I'm sure many of you in here can relate to. We artists make sacrifices in order to be in the studio more often. But sometimes this can go too far. There are times when one needs to rest or pay more attention to loved ones. It's an incredible experience to be able to make, but sometimes it's not the right time to make. Other times it is the right time, but one is confused and not positioned correctly. For me, this gets tricky when navigating expectations stemming from the various corners of life. When I started this residency, I'd been staying outside of RLE, which is just outside of Missoula, in a live-work situation after having finished grad school the year before. Upon arriving at the residency, I was in a mixed state of elation and shock. On one hand, there was the most supportive situation I had ever experienced as an artist right there in front of me. On the other, I was realizing how stifled, decayed, and unsupportive my situation back at home was. My goal at home was still to make, but I was tragically far from that. Again, things come back to the considerations behind the act of art making and the arrangements of life around this goal. As I reclaimed my practice at the residency, I suddenly found that I was able to approach and process things that had been stuck and unresolved. This is one of the most valuable aspects of artwork, that it allows for a type of understanding that exists outside of language. This is available to both the artist and the viewer. At the Clark Fork Coalition's field site, we had access to the upper Clark Fork River via a short trail that followed a dry creek bed. Naturally, it was full of cottonwoods, both living and dead, as well as numerous birds and critters. Walking the land around me is an important part of my artistic practice. It's a pairing of movement with passive observations while slowly rolling through thoughts and ideas. I had come to this residency to commune with the valley at large, but I found an entire universe in this common wash. It was in these cottonwoods that I finally found a way to let go of something more dear to me than I had ever known before. Radical acceptance is a term that cannot ring true until one has experienced it themselves. However, this is what I found waiting for me down this path. This painting, titled Oneness, is a visual representation of this awareness. The image comes from the ridge line high above our residency and the sweeping high meadows of the Continental Divide where wildflowers and cloud forms merge into one. From that vantage, we could see our cottonwoods. In those trees where I had cried so deeply, so many times, that through tear-soaked eyes, this larger landscape turned into an inner one. The dark space in the middle of this painting is what no longer needs to be understood. and the sky and the field are the insides of the upper and lower eyelids. I'm now going to read a medium-sized excerpt from The Miracle of Mindness by the late Thich Nhat Hanh, whose words are far wiser than mine. One is all is one, the five aggregates. Let me devote a few lines here to talk about the methods you might use in order to arrive at liberation from narrow views, to obtain fearlessness and great compassion. These are the contemplations of interdependence, impermanency, and compassion. When you sit in meditation after having taken hold of your mind, you can direct your concentration to contemplate on the interdependent nature of certain objects. This meditation is not a discursive reflection on a philosophy of This meditation is not a discursive reflection on a philosophy of interdependence. It's a penetration of the mind into the mind itself, using one's concentrative power to reveal the nature of the object being contemplated. Recall a simple and ancient truth. The subject of knowledge cannot exist independently from the object of knowledge. To see is to see something. To hear is to hear something. To be angry is to be angry over something. Hope is hope for something. Thinking is thinking about something. When the object of knowledge, the something, is not present, there can be no subject of knowledge. The practitioner meditates on mind, and by doing so is able to see the interdependence of the subject of knowledge and the object of knowledge. When we practice mindfulness of breath, then the knowledge of breath is mind. When we practice mindfulness of the body, then the knowledge of the body is mind. When we practice mindfulness of objects outside ourselves, then the knowledge of these objects is also mind. Therefore, the contemplation of the nature of interdependence of all objects is also the contemplation of the mind. Every object of the mind is itself mind. In Buddhism, we call the objects of the mind the dharmas. Dharmas are usually grouped into 5 categories: bodily and physical forms, feelings, perceptions, mental functionings, and consciousness. These 5 categories are called the 5 aggregates. The 5th category, consciousness, however, contains all the other categories and is the basis of their existence. Contemplation on interdependence is a deep looking into all the dharmas in order to pierce through to their real nature, in order to see them as part of the great body of reality, in order to see that the great body of reality is indivisible. It cannot be cut into pieces with separate existences of their own. The first object of contemplation is our own person, the assembly of the 5 aggregates in ourselves. You contemplate right here and now on the 5 aggregates which make up yourself. You are conscious of the presence of bodily form, feeling, perception, mental functionings, and consciousness. You observe these objects until you see that each of them has intimate connection with the world outside yourself. If the world did not exist, then the assembly of the 5 aggregates could not exist either. Consider the example of a table. The table's existence is possible due to the existence of things that we might call the non-table world. The forest where the wood grew and was cut, the carpenter, the iron ore which became the nails and screws, and the countless other things which have relation to the table. The parents and ancestors of the carpenter, the sun and rain which made it possible for the trees to grow. If you grasp the table's reality, then you see that in the table itself are present all those things which we normally think of as the non-table world. If you took away any of these non-table elements and returned them to their sources, the nails back to the iron ore, the wood to the forest, the carpenter to his parents, the table would no longer exist. A person who looks at the table and can see the universe is a person who can see the way. You meditate on the assembly of the 5 aggregates in yourself in the same matter. You meditate on them until you are able to see the presence of the reality of oneness in your own self and can see that your own life and the life of the universe are one. And if the 5 aggregates return to their sources, then the self no longer exists. Each second, the world nourishes the 5 aggregates. The self is no different from the assembly of the 5 aggregates. The assembly of the 5 aggregates plays as well a crucial role in the formation, creation, and destruction of all things in the universe. What was truly amazing about this experience was that once I had emptied myself, the images started pouring in. I continued to go out to the cottonwoods to sit on the fallen giants until my mind aligned with the ideas waiting out there. I feel strongly that artists are conduits for creative spirits. Becoming empty is synonymous with becoming full, just as life and death are 2 sides of the same coin. There is no need for frantic work or progress. Our lives are paradoxically wasted if focused on a ladder of goals. All we ever need is right in front of us. I'd like to address the ecological conservation aspect of this residency and exhibition. While there are many avenues in this field, what I advocate for is a spiritual re-engagement with nature. This entails a radical re-envisioning of nature as a fully animate consciousness. From the smallest drop of water or grain of sand to the tallest trees and mountains found worldwide, it is all an interconnected whole. Exceptional leaders like Robin Wall Kimmerer, Robert McFarlane, and Thich Nhat Hanh have articulated these ideas in widely accessible books and other media. Robert McFarlane recently published a new book titled Is a River Alive? This book takes these ideas head on. What I've learned from them is this: when one is able to walk each step as if they were kissing the earth, when one is able to sit in the landscape and completely empty themselves, when one celebrates nature as the true and only creator of life, this person does not clear-cut forests. This person does not dig giant holes in the ground, spreading toxins far and wide. This person does not exploit others to carry out their insane and self-serving destruction of our world. Their existence is harmonious and thus allows them to participate in the truth of a much larger consciousness than our own. The middle of this residency will always be one of the richest moments of my life. However, as we transitioned into the last few weeks, I could no longer avoid the thought of having to return to my life outside of Arlee. Something had to change. I've long thought of buying a van because my vehicle largely dictates what size paintings I can realistically make. It also became a dream of mine to turn one into a camper, since exploration of Western landscapes has long been an inspiration for my work. I know that I don't need to convey the dire reality of the current cost of living and the affordable housing shortage. This has obvious and destructive ramifications on artists that need studio spaces. This reality had a stranglehold on me, and I couldn't bear submitting to that anymore, to give up my access to creativity. So I hatched a plan. I'm lucky enough to have a large network of friends and family around the country that support my work. I reached out to them with the proposition that if they bought a painting from me in advance, then I would deliver it to them in person with my camper studio van that they helped me obtain. To my shock, my plan worked very quickly. After leaving the residency, I suddenly had enough money for a down payment. I was able to buy a cargo van and quickly gave notice that I would be moving out and moving on from Arlee. This change spurred new opportunities as my sudden freedom allowed me to accept an in-person teaching assignment in Billings. I was able to get the van built out enough over the winter to support my own summer residency, where I set up studios deep in the mountains of Nevada and Wyoming, creating work for those that had helped me. I'm so happy to tell you that despite continuing financial pressures, I was once again able to find that creative spirit while camped out in the woods. With the right environment, we artists can truly do what we are made to do. To add to Open Air's philosophy of artists being a keystone species, I would also add that any organization that authentically and unselfishly supports the creation of art is in itself an ecosystem of the healthiest and purest sort. Thank you.
So is this the only way to advance the slides, is with this guy?
Also use the arrows on the keypad down there.
Oh, okay. How do I make it,
It's a little, sorry, it's a little funny when it's
okay.
on the screen. Make it bigger for you. There you go.
Okay.
Oh, that's Eric's.
okay, is this working also, or just the one on my?
I think they both are.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Manette Bradford, and I'm going to be reading my presentation as well. I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I grew up in a family of artists. Both of my parents are visual artists. We spent a lot of time outside hiking, camping, canoeing, and observing the ecosystems and other species around us. We rarely watched TV, and when we did, it was PBS. We read constantly, and on trips to the library, I would check out as many books as possible and spend entire summers in my room reading about mythology, fairy tales, monsters, and history. As a result, I developed a rich inner life around all of these subjects, and to this day, they remain the primary sources of influence to my work: history, biology, mythology, psychology. In 2001, I received a BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with an emphasis on sculpture, primarily metalwork. This is me with some of my classmates at an annual iron conference, iron pouring, an iron pour that would happen in Wisconsin every year. So after college, I lived in Chicago for a while. I lived in the Bay Area, and then in 2020, I moved to Montana with my husband. I didn't know anything about Butte and its history and ecology until a year or so later. It was during a conversation with a friend of mine who mentioned Butte and the Copper Kings that I felt a powerful spark, a tingle in my mind that triggered a fascination with Butte and a deep dive into Butte research. I fell in love with Butte from afar and came out only a few times before applying to Open Air with the specific goal of getting this Butte residency. The magnitude of the copper mining industry and its ecological and sociological impact, the physical scale of the Continental Pit Mine and of the Berkeley Pit, and the scale of the Anaconda Smelter all fill me with awe and are endless sources of information for work. So this is a few pieces from a series of intaglio prints I made before my Open Air residency. These were produced in a residency that was in Berkeley. This is Fishkill 1. This is Anaconda. I did get the residency. I was really excited. And the first few days of orientation were spent touring historically and ecologically relevant sites in Butte, which was a powerful introduction to the entire experience. After orientation, I immediately started working. I was determined to make the most of my 6 weeks here. I worked on 2 projects until the last day of my residency, taking occasional infrequent breaks to explore the area, revisit the Berkeley pit, and attend other events. On the final day of my residency, I went on a bus tour during Smelterman days of the Anaconda Smelter Stack, which was the perfect ending to the whole experience and provided me with plenty of fuel for future work. Oh, this is a previous piece that I made about Butte, and it's a large-scale watercolor paper collage on canvas. This has been my primary medium for the past 10 years. I had a lovely, this is us at the Berkeley pit. This is all of us. It's a mine-tailing puddle. I had a lovely workspace at the Clark Chateau, but I spent the majority of my time working at Hungry Hill. I cleared out a space for myself there and was allowed to use it as a studio. It was in this space that I spent the majority of my time, often until late at night. I had access to so many resources during the residency, but I wanted to stay focused and complete projects while there and not get option paralysis. I worked there until the last day of my residency when Mike Kajawa, my husband, and I loaded my work into the kiln to dry and fire, and I returned a few weeks later to pick it up and bring it home. So this is Hydra 2, which you see outside. This was Hydra 2 work in progress. I made a press mold and then just produced 3 different sizes of fish and then added the tails. And there's the head. And when all of this was fired, I brought it back to my studio in Billings and painted it there. I painted it with acrylic and watercolor. The next piece I produced during my residency, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go back, talk a little bit more about Hydra. Before the residency, I had planned on producing a series of copper plate engravings at the IBRC and even bought all of the materials I would need and prepared plates. But up until the residency, my relationship with all of the Butte subject matter was through research and was very removed and intellectual. Witnessing the Continental Pit Mine and finally being in Butte provided me with a different, direct understanding and shifted my perspective. I wanted to work somatically, directly with clay and water. So Hydra 2, in this work I referenced the Hydra in Greek mythology as a metaphor for the ecological devastation of mining and smelting that seems to exist in perpetuity. The Hydra was a serpentine water monster with poisonous breath and blood, and each head would regenerate as soon as it was cut off. Killing the Hydra was the first of the 12 labors of Heracles. In many mythologies, the serpent and serpentine forms are commonly associated with the powerful, changing, unpredictable characteristics of water. In Hydra 2, the fish are monstrous, but it is the devastation of the Clark Fork ecosystem that makes them this way. It is the ecological condition that is monstrous, not the fish themselves. So this brings us to Our Lady, the second piece I produced. Our Lady is the direct result of 2 experiences. The first was the experience of touring and witnessing the Continental Pit Mine and contemplating its scale. The second was the constant ethereal presence of Our Lady of the Rockies. At night in my room, at my bed and breakfast, I had a window overlooking the city, the site of the Berkeley pit and the Continental Pit Mine, with Our Lady of the Rockies perched above, glowing luminous and overlooking it all. I thought a lot about the many meanings and significance of that allegorical female figure and the gaping wound in the earth beneath her. The contrast between the exaltation of this feminine form and the continuous extraction happening below. So at this piece, I made press molds, and that's how I produced the body parts. And then I made the pit mine separately, and then I fit the body parts into the pit mine. I had to make them in separate parts because it was too large to fire all at once. And then I brought it back to Billings, painted it, and mounted it to wood. So fast forward to this past year, I was artist in residence at the Yellowstone Art Museum, and this is the piece that you see, the work in progress that is on the platform as you're walking up the stairs. Its title is After Me. On February 23rd, 1907, William Andrews Clark, the famous Copper King of Butte and U.S. Senator from the state of Montana, said during a speech he gave on the Senate floor, railing against Teddy Roosevelt's U.S. Forest Service. In rearing the great structure of empire on the Western Hemisphere, we are obliged to avail ourselves of all the resources at our command. The requirements of this great utilitarian age demand it. Those who succeed us can well take care of themselves. A year later, in 1908, rain, snow, and snowmelt from a series of storms in late May and early June created some of the most devastating floods ever experienced in western Montana. 1,000 acres worth of toxic mine tailings washed into Silver Bow Creek and the Clark Fork River, spreading throughout the floodplain and piling up behind what was the Milltown Dam, killing life everywhere it went. This flood and Clark's quote that preceded it are eerily reminiscent of the famous quote by the French King Louis XV. I don't speak French, so my pronunciation is going to be terrible. Après moi le déluge, after me the deluge, which has been interpreted in many different ways. Though many have argued that this quote has been taken out of context, it is commonly interpreted as the king's nihilistic indifference to whatever happens when he is gone. It has also been interpreted as a prediction of the French Revolution. Some historians have argued that this quote actually refers to the impending arrival of Halley's Comet, which at the time was thought to have caused the Great Flood in the Bible. Floods represent many things. They represent destruction, creation, cleansing of the earth, preparation for rebirth, divine retribution, regeneration, overwhelming emotion, and transformational change. After Me is a work in progress, the first of two parts. I am currently working on the second half. I had originally planned on making this work a series of large watercolor paper collages on canvas, but soon realized that this piece was too important to me to flatten my images on a two-dimensional surface. The part of my collage process where I am moving my images around and playing with composition is the most dynamic and exciting, and I wanted to preserve this in the work. So I mounted each piece to wood panel and made everything modular and freestanding to preserve my ability to experiment with composition. Every time this piece is installed, it will be different. There are three main characters in this work. William Clark and West Slope cutthroat trout are two of them, but the main character is water. My intention with this current project and all of my work related to Butte, Anaconda, and the Clark Fork River system. Oh, sorry, this is my usual process. This was when I had a studio at the Roosevelt Center in Red Lodge, and I make all of my imagery. I paint it all large scale on watercolor paper, and I cut it out, and then I experiment with composition on a large canvas. This was it set up in the vault studio at the Yellowstone Art Museum before I installed it, and this is what I had completed when I finished my residency, so I'm continuing to work on it. What you see outside on the platform is about a third of its size, or what it will be, or maybe larger. I don't know. I could continue to work on it for a long time. My intention with this current project and all of my work related to Butte, Anaconda, and the Clark Fork River system is to integrate historical events, conditions, and figures with the contemporary, and to emphasize interdependence and eliminate assumed hierarchical distinctions between our species and all other species and elements in our ecosystem. The opportunity to show work at the archives and be able to engage directly with Butte through the work is incredible. I'm so grateful for the support I received during my residency and that I'm continuing to receive, and all of the wonderful people I had the pleasure of getting to know through this amazing experience. Does anybody have any questions?